Hey lads, gals, we're here. Welcome back to Building Tips, and today we are going to look at pathways and ways to maneuver around builds and your Minecraft worlds. And this could be a very tricky one because the techniques that not techniques, more like the elements that are required to make a good pathway aren't super obvious. Now, the main ones, the main thing to keep in mind is that the two things to keep in mind are that pathways are supposed to lead your eye from one place to another. The other thing is that they're supposed to guide you physically. Being able to walk down a path and knowing where you're supposed to be going is really important. Now, here I have 3 different variants of pathways using the pathway block. It's called dirt path in the game. Anyway, the first one here in the middle is a thicker pathway. Sorry, I just opened the creative menu. And these are generally used for busier, bigger roads or bigger pathways that you would naturally travel on more. And the one over here to the left is more scattered. Like, imagine this is just barely trodden grass, right? People don't walk this one nearly as often. Be careful with these ones and implementing them because the level of noise and the shadows that are cast when you have them separated like this can be a bit much for the eye and distract you from the builds around it, right? And so you really only want to use this one inside areas where you don't have much to look at. And the one over here is kind of a mix. It's a thinner pathway, but it's more windy and kind of goes around things. Now here, they're all on a flat plane, because this is a super flat world. But what's important here is to really follow the contour of wherever you're building, right? Because if you don't, it's going to look really out of place, and you have to really think about where you would walk. Now, in a survival world, you can really look at where you walk. Like, physically, where do you go from place to place by walking? And that can really help you out on where to build your pathways. And moving on, this is basically a take of this style of pathway, following a proverbial contour, but using a more detailed pathway, using different types of browns like coarse dirt, packed mud, and brown concrete powder. For my example, you can use different blocks if you wish, but the important thing is to make it look like it's a part of the world. And like the dirt, because if you use just coarse dirt here, it will look so busy. And that's a really important thing if you want to go for a textured pathway, is that the noise level can really fluctuate, and it's important to keep the noise level to a minimum, because when you have the noise here, it distracts your eyes from what you've built around it, right? And that's not the point. The pathways are supposed to guide your eye from place to place, not keep your eyes focused on the pathway, right? And a technique you can often use in order to keep it within the natural world around it is by adding bushes, rocks, tall grass, and even certain water fixtures can do this too. Those are the main things you want to keep in mind when you're doing pathways like this. And the difference between this and this is that you don't need to worry about the noise level, because the noise level of a path block isn't that much. Like, in general, it's pretty easy to look at. Whereas this, you can make it hard to look at if you try. Or if you don't try, if you think about it. Anyway, moving on, we have these types of pathways. These more developed pathways. These three right here. I'm not talking about that one. The trick here is that it becomes harder to follow a contour of the world around you when you do it like this. Now, if you are building in creative mode and making some sort of super flat city, that's no big deal. The contours don't exist in a super flat world. But if you're doing this in a regular terrain world, it's going to be more difficult to fit this into the world cohesively. It's just something to watch out for. And if you're going to use pathways like this, I recommend you take the time to understand how this could blend well into your world. Now, this one right here is, of course, a road. Like a road in real life. And this has the same problems as this, but to an even more extreme level. Because A, it's much bigger. It's a big pathway. And it can often really... There's almost no way to fit this into the world super well. Especially in 1.18 terrain where the elevations are crazier and more varied. I would really only recommend you do something like this if you're really skilled and you know what you're doing. Of course, if you're in a super flat world, this doesn't matter. You're good there. But the important thing is, when you're building pathways like this, is to have features that are there to make the road feel more alive. Like these lampposts here. You can also add cars here and even like armor stands and stuff to symbolize people. Unfortunately, my vehicle game is terrible. I'm terrible at building cars. You're not going to get a tutorial on how to build cars on this channel. Unfortunately, you can look other places. I'm sure there's enough. But that's really the thing, is to be diligent on how you build these roads and to fit them seamlessly into your landscape. And the last one is sort of a mixture of a pathway and a bridge, which is a boardwalk. You find these here and there in the world, like in real life. And they're really here to bridge the gap between the two. And you really want to only use these in marshy landscapes like swamps. Swamp biomes are really good for these pathways. And there's really not much of a technique here. I would just recommend you not make it super straight, but not make it super windy. It's kind of a bit of both in terms of that. Like, in terms of the windy level, it's not really that windy. But it does curve a little bit, right? And here, I just wanted to put like a little fun one here. That was different than the other ones that I've displayed here. But yeah, these are all the pathways I have displayed for you here. And the main thing here is to make sure that your pathways fit well within what you're building. Like, if you're going to build a modern city, like, a suburban city even, you don't want pathways like this. You just don't. It's going to look ugly, it's going to look weird, it's going to look out of place. It just will, right? And likewise, you wouldn't build this in a medieval castle build or a medieval city build, a citadel of sorts, right? You just wouldn't. And those are obvious things, but you really got to test out what kind of pathways work well and to make sure that it doesn't detract from what you're building, like the buildings around it. And a good test for this, right, would probably be, would you want to walk on these pathways for an extended period of time, like over and over and over again? And if the answer is yes, then you've done it. You've done a good job. But if the answer is no, you might want to rethink how you built your pathway. But anyways, that is the end of this building tutorial. Of course, I hope you enjoyed it, found it useful, and let me know if you want me to cover another building, another facet of building in Minecraft, because I will sure be able to do it. Except cars, I will not do vehicles. I just won't. But yes, anyways, if you have any suggestions on what I cover in the next building tips video, leave it in the comments. Well, otherwise, I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you lads later. Take care.